Hey everyone, welcome to another NFL preview show. Today we're previewing the NFC South. This is Phenomenon Merlin Sports. Joining me today is D-Dog, and how are you doing, my friend?
I am doing well. Just finished up the preseason game, Monday night game.
Yeah, as we're making our way through the NFL preseason, what better time to talk about uh, the upcoming season and how we think some teams are going to fare. Specifically today, the NFC South. So how this division ended up last year was the Tampa Bay Bucks won the division at 10-7, pretty much almost went wire to wire, but they had a little bit of opposition from Atlanta, who finished second at 8-9. Carolina Panthers finished third at 5-12, and the New Orleans Saints actually finished fourth with the same record, 5-12. Let's start with those Saints and then kind of work our way up. We're gonna break down each team, and at the end we'll say who's gonna win and who we think will make the playoffs. So the New Orleans Saints definitely lots of they're having a true young quarterback battle of the young stars. Well, maybe they drafted Tyler Shue, and he is in the battle with Spencer Rattler. So it's probably the youngest quarterback room in the league because there's two young inexperienced. One's a true rookie, and one, you know, is pretty raw. So probably youngest quarterback. They still have Alvin Kamara at running back. A wide receiver, Chris Olave, and Brandon could they brought in Brandon Cooks, so this is he joins yet another NFL team. So yeah, a couple of good targets to throw to. But they're really short on talent on offense and defense. They got a couple of good pieces on defense at the edges and Cameron Jordan and Chase Young. So they got a good tandem there. That's probably where the quality stops, though. It kind of drops off, and it looks probably to be another tough year in New Orleans. And I know there's a lot of talk that whether intentionally or not, that they might be in the run for the top draft pick in the offseason, and of course lots of speculation on Archie Manning being the number one pick. Of course, a quarterback in Texas. I mean, we don't even know if he is going to declare for the draft or not at the end of the year, and it also depends on what kind of year he has in college. So, a lot of people are really getting ahead of themselves, but it's nonetheless a storyline. Of course, Archie's grandfather was a New Orleans Saint back in the day, and they have a lot of history there in New Orleans. So, what better fit for Archie Manning um, to go to New Orleans. But it's going to be a tough year in New Orleans. There's no question about it. They might not even be favored to win one game this year. I'm looking at the schedule, maybe against Carolina when they play at home, but that's probably about it. I think it'll be a tough year in New Orleans, and they're in the rebuild. And I think this rebuild's going to still take some time, even though they have some veterans, Chase Young, Cameron Jordan, and Alvin Kamara. I mean, if they ever wanted to trade some players, they have some trade commodities if they really wanted to get out all the veterans. But it's going to be a tough year in New Orleans. What do you think, D-Dog?
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I mean, they had a rough year last year. And I think they wasn't planned. Um, but I think coming into this year, they kind of look at the landscape. Yeah, they still have some talent on that team. So I mean, I think depth is a challenge for them. I'm not saying I wouldn't say starting talent, but I think depth is going to be something for them that they'll have to deal with. I'm not sold on Spencer Rattler. He started his career at Oklahoma, left it, went to South Carolina. He was okay at South Carolina, wasn't great. Um, So he could be like a D, he might be a DLG. He, he might be a DLG, but you know, at the end of the day, at the end of the day, they're going to need a quarterback upgrade eventually because I don't think Spencer Rattler is good enough. Um, losing like they put a lot of eggs in Derek Carr when he came over from the Vegas Raiders, but he decided to move on and retire. So that basically wipes him out of a franchise guy that they thought they had. But you're right, they still have some talent on the offensive side of the ball. Um, Alvin Kamara is still one of the top running backs in the league. Um, they brought in Brandon Cooks, but Chris Olave is a good young wide receiver. He comes from that long lineage of Ohio State receivers. There's one thing Ohio State does very well is produce receivers. So yeah, I mean this division is really Tampa and everybody else, right? Maybe Atlanta can move up to something, but I think this division is Tampa and everybody else. Uh, I think they'll be better than last year, um, which means they'll be better than Carolina because really I don't know how good Carolina is. I don't know if I know Carolina thinks they have a franchise quarterback, but I'm not convinced there. So I think they'll be better than Carolina. Are they going to do like are they going to be that much better and challenge for a playoff spot? No, but I do think they'll be better than last year, and that'll be better than Carolina because last year when they lost their quarterback, everything because he was injured, everything like kind of screwed them up. But this year they'll know that they're going to be playing with whoever wins the starting job. I think it's going to be Rattler. I don't even think it's Taysom Hill. I think it's going to be Rattler that wins the starting job. So
Mhm.
they finished 5-12. I think they get to to 6-11. I don't think they'll be that much better than 6-11, but I think they'll be better slightly.
Okay. Well, let's move on to Carolina, and you kind of mentioned them when we're talking about the Saints. Carolina also finished 5-12 last year. And of course, we saw Bryce Young go in the lineup, out of the lineup, and then back when he re-entered the lineup later in the season after Andy Dalton went down. I mean, he at least he showed some upside and some promise that was missing from the first stint before he was pulled in favor of Dalton. So, I mean, that's a positive for Carolina because they moved up in the draft to grab Bryce Young, and by doing so, they traded DJ Moore. So they gave up a lot, and it was a tough situation last year. I mean, the offensive line was not that great, and like a lot of other young quarterbacks, when you hang on to the ball too long and your offensive line isn't that great, it's a recipe for disaster in terms of taking sacks, and we saw Bryce Young struggle. They do have Chuba Hubbard at running back, who's a pretty decent running back, and they added Rico Dowdle as well. So there's a couple of good running backs in the room, and they drafted Trevor Etienne, which is his brother's also a running back for Jacksonville. So a bit of name power there. Adam Thielen, found some chemistry when Bryce Young came back into the lineup later in the season. He had good chemistry with Adam Thielen, who had a pretty decent year, on the backside of his career. So that was good to see. That was some of the promise. But looks like they didn't do that much to improve the defense. So this is one of the worst defenses in the league, and it's probably going to struggle again on defense. They don't really have that many good defenders. So, and as good as I mentioned, those some of those offensive players were, they're not good enough to outscore their opponents in a a track meet style game. So they're gonna have to get some play from their defense in order to improve on their win total from last year. I'm looking at their schedule. They draw the AFC East, which means they're going to play Buffalo, Miami. Looks like they've drawn Green Bay as well, San Francisco. So there's some. I see some pretty tough teams on their schedule. They'll play Seattle as well and the Rams. So I think it's going to be a tough year in Carolina. Uh, I think, well, I think they're going to do slightly better than they did last year. So it's the 6 or 7 win mark. I do think that they will finish ahead of New Orleans. Well, how are you thinking about the Panthers' chances this year?
Yeah, I mean the Panthers they focused a lot on getting Bryce Young as the number one overall pick. Bryce hasn't really lived up to it. I think his biggest challenge is he's actually undersized. He's not a very big guy, and even moving around, he it's still hard for him because the players are so much bigger and faster. In college, he could get away with it being a smaller guy, but at 5'10" and 200 pounds, it's harder for him to play in the NFL and be a competitive quarterback. Uh, I look at Carolina; they don't really have too much overall talent on their team. Uh, that you mentioned a couple guys, but other than Chuba Hubbard, I don't see that. I don't. Adam Thielen is the only receiver that I see that could get you excited on that. Having said that, yeah, they did play better in the second half of the last season. I think allowing Bryce Young to watch a veteran quarterback like Andy Dalton allowed him to get a little bit better. But this team is not a deep team. They don't have a lot of game breakers. Probably Bryce Young's probably the biggest breaker. Um, and I agree with you there. I think they'll be battling New Orleans for who's going to finish last. And not surprisingly, I think that Carolina will go back to their last place ways because they just don't have enough talent. And I don't know. And drafting, they didn't really focus on it. Thing with Trevor Etienne is he got in a lot of trouble. He went to Florida. They kicked him out of school, so he went to Georgia. So he seemed to be a model citizen, but originally they were uh his draft stock fell because of that. Like he could have been a higher draft pick. He's a pretty solid running back, but he's had problems off the field. So we'll see how that goes. But I don't see them getting. I think New Orleans last year was in a bit of disarray with everything that happened with Carr getting injured and stuff like that. This year, they know who their quarterback is going to be, even if he's not good enough to be a great quarterback. But Bryce Young's not going to take anybody there. He needs more talent on the offensive side of the ball to be a better team. So I don't think Carolina finishes ahead of thing. I think they'll still have the same record, 5-12, maybe 6-11 at best. But I don't see them getting more than 6 wins at the most.
Okay. So why don't we move on to the Atlanta Falcons, who finished second last year at 8-9. And we saw Michael Penix Jr. come in partway through the season to replace Kirk Cousins, who they kind of threw the towel after signing him to a big contract. So why don't you take us through your thoughts on the Atlanta Falcons coming into this season?
Yeah, so I mean, it's going to be interesting to see how Michael Penix Jr. does now that he's got the full reign of the offense. Atlanta originally, everybody thought with Kirk Cousins coming over, they're going to have a really good team. Their defense was pretty solid last year, but their offense couldn't find a rhythm. They struggled a lot, and so over time, that's why Kirk Cousins got removed and they put Penix in. The problem with Penix is very good player, but he's injury prone. He's torn two ACLs in college. He's an older quarterback, so But he looked pretty good in flashes last year when he played at the end of the season. I don't think they're a playoff team. I don't think they're that good of a team. They could probably come back to 8-9, maybe 9-8, but not much more than that. Um, Obviously, it helps. They get to play Carolina and New Orleans, so that's like 4 wins. That's 4 wins right there for them. But I don't see Atlanta challenging the upper echelon of the AFC, not AFC, NFC for for a for a playoff spot. I think they'll finish second, but not much more than that. I mean, they have some good players on their team, but they just don't have. They won't have enough compared to what Tampa's going to roll out.
All right. Okay. Well, I I like Atlanta's chances this year, and yeah, because their talent on offense. So like you mentioned, Michael Penix Jr., he's going to get the ball from day one, and it'll be his team to run with. And he's surrounded by some of the best talented young players in the league right now. Right? Bijan Robinson at running back is just a stud at running back, and he's only scratching the surface. He had a massive year last year, and he stands to have a pretty massive year this year. Drake London, I think, was a breakout star at wide receiver for the Falcons. And he, barring any injury, he looks like 1,000-yard receiver from season to season. They got a couple other good receivers, Mooney and Ray McLeod. Um, Kyle Pitts at tight end. We're still kind of waiting for him to break through. He's got a lot of talent, and is this the year he can be more involved in the offense? I'm not sure, but from a talent perspective, like there's a lot of talent there, right? And the thing is if something were to happen to Michael Penix Jr., you do got Kirk Cousins. Maybe he's better suited to coming off the bench as a backup, getting this late in his career. But he would be a capable backup in case something did happen to Penix. Their defense is decent, not spectacular, but I think their defense will need to be better if they are to challenge Tampa Bay for the division. They got a pretty good kicker, Young Ho Ko. Um, he makes a lot of kicks, so yeah, they got some pretty good talent. And like you mentioned, they'll play Carolina and New Orleans twice. So there's potential. You should get 3 out of 4 wins, if not 4 wins. So that almost takes you halfway to 500. And I'm going to differ from you. I'm going to say Atlanta does take the division from Tampa Bay this year. And I think it'll be in reverse. So I think 10 wins might be enough to win the division, and I see Atlanta hovering around the 10-win mark just because of their upside on offense. And I think they'll leapfrog Tampa Bay. Well, let's talk
Interesting.
about yeah. Well, let's talk about those Tampa Bay Bucks since this we both see that it'll be these two teams that'll be battling for the division. And of course, Tampa Bay won out last year and finished 10-7, and it was a pretty good year for Baker Mayfield, um, which is positive. So now he looks like he's stabilized the quarterback and a position at Tampa Bay, so they're gonna roll with it. Um, joining Baker Mayfield, pretty decent running back, Bucky Irving and Rashad White at running back. So you got decent running backs in Tampa. Of course, Mike Evans and Chris Godwin are real quality receivers, so they will have a good pair of receivers, potential for 1,000 yards if they stay healthy. I know Chris Godwin in particular has had a hard time staying healthy in recent seasons, but if he's able to stay healthy, they got quality at the receiver position. And they do a decent job of protecting the quarterback. Um, their defense is, they're pretty good in the secondary. And Todd Bowles, he's a pretty good veteran coach. And he's Tampa Bay is pretty good. They're pretty good scheming for other teams. So they're a well-coached team. They will play just like Atlanta gets to play Carolina and New Orleans twice in 1 year. So that's always advantageous. Um, so we'll see. I just think that that Atlanta will push them. Atlanta has a little bit more talent, and as good as Baker Mayfield has been, he's been consistent. I just don't think he takes you to the next level. So I see a bit of regression in Tampa Bay. Not by much. I think they'll still hover around the 9-win mark. So I'm going to call them for 9-8 and to just miss out on the division, winning the division, as I think Atlanta would win out. So how do you think Tampa Bay is going to shape up this year?
Yeah, so when I looked at this division, I sort of laughed and said Tampa's going to win it just by default, just because um they, they got I don't know if Atlanta has more talent. I think Tampa Bay is just like they're a group of veterans. They're not necessarily a young team. They've made the playoffs the last 2 seasons. Baker, I think, has found a home in Tampa. He was a disaster for a few teams, but he seems to have come here. Maybe it's the fact that he spent time with the Los Angeles Rams and McVay to kind of get him right, like kind of like Sam Donald did with Kevin O'Connell in Minnesota for last year. So um, I don't see a reason why they can't continue to run this division and win the division again. They do have a lot of talent on the offensive side of the ball. I mean, you're talking about Mike Evans, Chris Godwin. They added Emeka Ibuka, who's fantastic. Again, Ohio State wide receiver. He's just coming out this year. Very good hands, good speed, not great speed, but good speed. And he knows how to get open and make catches. So it's going to be interesting to see. I mean, they did lose some players. They lost Shaq Barrett, who's a very good linebacker, but I think Tampa has enough around them. Todd Bowles is a defensive coach, so they're not going to necessarily lose whatever unless Dan. I'm talking about Dan. But they're not going to lose anything out of that in terms of their team. Can they go 10-7 again? Yeah, probably. Could they jump to 11-6? I think that's their ceiling, 11-6. I don't think they're higher than 11-6. So it's going to be like I still think Tampa wins the division because I just think they're just better than everybody else,
Hmm.
right?
Do
Yeah. I
you
mean,
do you see do you see any other teams making the playoffs from this division besides the division winner?
no. I think Tampa I think Tampa wins the division. I think they make the playoffs, right? And I think that they almost win the division by default because New Orleans and Carolina is so bad. Atlanta might give them a run for their money, like they did last year. But again, it's kind of risky with Michael Penix. I know they have Kirk Cousins as a backup in Atlanta, but Father Time catches up with everybody. And Cousins was never that great of a quarterback to begin with. He was solid. He beats the teams he's supposed to beat. So if anything happens to Penix, which is entirely possible, I don't know what they got behind him besides Kirk Cousins, and I don't know if Kirk Cousins could still deliver. He was upset that he lost the starting job, so maybe that motivates him if he comes in. But yeah, I just think Tampa, until somebody comes up and finds some additional talent to knock them off the perch, I think Tampa will win again. But I think their ceiling's 11-6 at best, probably 10-7 to get it done again. But I only see one team out of this. So
Playoffs? Don't talk about it. Playoffs? You kidding me?
I have Tampa, Atlanta, New Orleans and Carolina bringing up the rear.
Right. Yeah, and so I just have Atlanta and Tampa flipped. So I have Atlanta, Tampa, Carolina, and then New Orleans. And unfortunately, I think New Orleans is probably going to be one of the worst teams in the league record wise this year.
Yeah, I
And
wouldn't disagree with that.
yeah. Okay. Well, thanks, D-Dog, for breaking down the NFC South. And I'd like to thank everyone for joining us. And we will talk to you later, my friend.
Thank you very much.